Good evening, Facebook friends and YouTube followers. This is Rich again, back for your third and final video blog of the night for October 23rd, 2014, around 9:04 p.m. in Billerica, Massachusetts. Damp and dreary tonight. Some rain showers left over from this afternoon and this morning. Got a torrential rains and some flooding, and hopefully we won't get any flooding tonight and tomorrow morning. Some news to report. Sad news in the world of politics in Boston. Former Boston Mayor Tom Menino has announced he's foregoing any cancer treatments, and he's going to be spending time with his family and friends. His book tour has been postponed indefinitely. I think Tom Menino is suffering from terminal cancer and probably does not have too much time to live, so he's going to spend the rest of his days with his loved ones, family, and friends. Prayers to Tom and his family for this time of need. Cancer's a deadly disease. It needs to be curable 100% and beaten 100%. Hopefully we see a cure for cancer in our lifetimes. And that's about it on that. And my third and final video blog subject of the night is about the legendary professional wrestler, the late, great Mr. Perfect Curt Henning. I've been waiting to do a video blog on Mr. Perfect Curt Henning since I started, and here it is. Mr. Perfect Curt Henning was one of the best heel wrestlers of all time, a multiple-time Intercontinental Champion, a former AWA World Champion, 2007 WWE Hall of Famer. Curt Henning was famous for his heel character, and also he did ribs behind the scenes in professional wrestling. Curt Henning was born in Robbinsdale, Minnesota, and wrestling was in his blood because his father was the legendary pro wrestler Larry the Axe Henning. Curt Henning went to Robbinsdale, Minnesota High School. He graduated in 1976. Some of his classmates he graduated with became professional wrestlers like the late Ravishing Rick Rude and Tom Zink and Road Warrior Hawk and Nikita Koloff. Curt was trained to become a professional wrestler by Vern Gagne, Playboy Buddy Rose, and his father Larry the Axe Henning. Curt debuted in the world of professional wrestling in 1980. He wrestled in the AWA. He was a jobber to the Stars for a couple of years in the AWA. Then in 1982, he went to the Northeast to wrestle for the WWE. He was a jobber there as well, and he did like some amazing drop kicks and competitive for these jobber matches, but he still lost. He had almost had a few upsets. He also teamed with the late great Eddie Gilbert there. In 1983, Curt Henning went to Portland Wrestling, the Pacific Northwest territory, and he won their version of the world title, and he won the Pacific Northwest Tag Team Championship on 3 occasions. 1984, he returns to the AWA, and for the next 4 years, Curt became one of the AWA's biggest stars. He teamed with his father, Larry the Axe Henning, and also Greg Gagne. He also teamed with Scott Hall. Him and Scott Hall became AWA World Tag Team Champions in 1986 by beating Georgia's Jimmy Garvin and Mr. Electricity Steve Regal. They held the AWA World Tag Team titles for about 8 months. They lost it to Playboy Buddy Rose and Pretty Boy Doug Summers. Then Curt goes on a singles career. He has some legendary matches with AWA World Champion Nick Bockwinkel. Had a 60-minute time limit draw, and that match was shown on ESPN on New Year's Eve 1986, highest rated program to date to that point in ESPN's history. Curt was very competitive. He was bleeding profusely, crimson mask. He was getting good as a performer, and in April of 1987, Curt turned heel on Greg Gagne, and in the next month, May 1987, Curt faces off against Nick Bockwinkel at Super Clash 2 at San Francisco's Cow Palace. Curt Henning wins with interference by Larry Sabisco. He gives him a row of coils, knocks Nick Bockwinkel out, and Curt Henning becomes the new AWA World Champion. For the next 1 year, Curt becomes one of the greatest champions in AWA history, defending it against all comers. Wahoo McDaniel, Grady Cutler Stevens, Nick Bockwinkel, Greg Gagne. He had some legendary matches with Greg Gagne, including one in Thanksgiving night 1987 at the St. Paul Civic Center in St. Paul, Minnesota, which St. Paul was the #1 arena for the AWA back in the day. And this match was great that there was interference by Larry the Axe Henning and Vern Gagne, and Greg Gagne supposedly won the AWA championship against Curt Henning at this event. And on the next week on television, the match results was reversed. Curt retained the title. Story behind that, I heard, a lot of AWA promoters did not want to see Greg Gagne as AWA World Champion because they thought it was too much nepotism, and many AWA promoters in the cities that the AWA went were going to refuse to promote them anymore, so they gave it back to Curt Henning. Curt eventually lost the AWA World Championship in May of 1988 to Jerry the King Lawler. He had some matches with Lawler, rematches. They were pretty good, but Curt didn't regain the title. He was briefly managed by Dallas Page and Medusa Michelli. But the WWE called in the summer of 1988, and they got Curt to go up to the Northeast, New York, and he was given a gimmick that was absolutely perfect. It was the Mr. Perfect gimmick. The vignettes of the Mr. Perfect Survivor of the WWE was doing stuff perfectly, like throwing darts, diving, hitting baseballs, holes in ones, bowling, saving goals, shooting hoops, and throwing footballs. Mr. Perfect debuted on television in 1988 October. Next 18 months, he did not lose one match on television. Mr. Perfect had some great matches with the Blue Blazer at WrestleMania 5, the Blue Blazers Owen Hart. He also had a good match on house show circuits with Bret the Hitman Hart. He beat the Red Rooster at SummerSlam 1989. And in October 1989 on television, Mr. Perfect was starting a program with Hulk Hogan. And Mr. Perfect got a manager, the genius Lanny Poffo. His pairing was okay, but I didn't really like Mr. Perfect being managed by Lanny Poffo. Lanny Poffo, for many years, was a jobber. And on Saturday night's main event, in 2 days after Thanksgiving in November 1989, the Genius face off against Hulk Hogan for the WWE Championship. Mr. Perfect interferes and takes the WWE title, and during the interview segment with me and Gene Okerlund, Mr. Perfect was destroying the WWE title, that title. And eventually, they didn't have a match on television. They had several matches on house show circuits where Hulk Hogan beats Mr. Perfect. And they actually had a tag team match on Saturday night's main event in January 1990 with Mr. Perfect and the genius Lanny Poffo against the Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan. But this was to set up Hogan and Warrior for WrestleMania 6. And then Mr. Perfect goes into a feud with Brutus the Barber Beefcake. And this culminated at WrestleMania 6 in Toronto, Canada, where Brutus the Barber Beefcake beats Mr. Perfect. Mr. Perfect's first loss on television. And also, Brutus the Barber Beefcake gives the Genius a haircut. And that's it. Mr. Perfect and the Genius split up on television. And this is when Hulk Hogan loses the WWE title to the Ultimate Warrior. Ultimate Warrior has to vacate the IC Championship, and they have a tournament on television to crown the new WWE IC Champion. Mr. Perfect beats Superfly Jimmy Snuka in the opening round, and then he gets a bye to the finals. Then on WWE Superstars of May 1990, he faces two-time WWE IC Champion Tito Santana, with the winner getting the new becoming the new IC Champion. Tito Santana was in control for a lot of the match, and he was about to three-peat as IC Champion, but Bobby the Brain Heenan comes down and distracts Tito Santana, and Mr. Perfect beats Tito for 1, 2, 3, and then Mr. Perfect's new manager, is Bobby the Brain Heenan. This was a perfect pair. In the next few months, Mr. Perfect feuded with Tito Santana on house shows. Also, he feuded with Jake the Snake Roberts. And Mr. Perfect was slated to lose the IC title to Brutus the Barber Beefcake at SummerSlam 90. But Brutus the Barber Beefcake did not make it to SummerSlam 90 because Brutus the Barber Beefcake got into a parasailing accident that destroyed his face, and he was off of TV for a while. That's another story for another day. And then the WWE scrambling to see who Mr. Perfect's going to face in 1990 SummerSlam, and they picked a mistake. They picked the Texas Tornado, Kerry Von Erich, who just debuted in the WWE, and he was in rough shape. But at SummerSlam 90, the Texas Tornado beats Mr. Perfect 1, 2, 3 in a poor match. Mr. Perfect had to carry the match. And then Texas Tornado flops as IC champion. The WWE realized that mistake and put the title on Mr. Perfect on an edition of Superstars in 1990, December, with help from the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase. And Mr. Perfect's back as champion for a second time as IC champion. Good move. Next 9 months, Mr. Perfect has a good reign as IC champion. He beats Rowdy Piper. He's feuded with Piper, Rowdy Piper. Also, he had a match with the Big Boss Man at WrestleMania 7, which Boss Man won by disqualification with interference by the Barbarian and Haku, and also he wrestled Greg the Hammer Valentine and the British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith in some house shows. But around early summer of 1991, Mr. Perfect hurts his back. And also this is around the time that Bobby the Brain Heenan leaves managing to go into the broadcast booth because Bobby the Brain Heenan had like some neck problems. And Mr. Perfect was given a new manager, coach, who was John Tolis, a legendary professional wrestler on the West Coast in the 60s and 70s. But in his role as coach, he was miscast. He blew the whistle. And he also briefly managed the Beverly Brothers. But that's another story for another day. And on the television matches Mr. Perfect's having, he's barely working good. And he was pulled for most house show matches. Mr. Perfect wrestled Bret the Hitman Hart in an IC title defense, SummerSlam 91. It was a great match. It was great. And Bret Hart becomes IC champion. Mr. Perfect was hurt most of that match. For the next 15 months, Mr. Perfect did not wrestle at all to heal his back, and he became a heel announcer and a manager to Nature Boy Ric Flair, who was in the WWE. He led Ric Flair to 2 WWE World title reigns. And around Survivor Series 1992, it was going to be the Ultimate Warrior and Macho Man Randy Savage against Nature Boy Ric Flair and Razor Ramon, but the Warrior gets fired in the WWE, and they had to find a replacement. And on Primetime Wrestling, Randy Macho Man Savage was teasing Curt Henning about joining him, and Curt Henning was thinking about it. Finally, he does. He turns on Bobby the Brain Heenan, and then becomes a face. And the Survivor Series 1992 matchup was Mr. Perfect and Randy Macho Man Savage against Razor Ramon and Nature Boy Ric Flair. Was a good match. Fans came to cheer for Mr. Perfect. Then Perfect faced off against Flair in several house shows. They had an amazing match on Monday Night Raw in January 1993, where the loser leaves WWE match. Mr. Perfect wins, and Flair's gone from the WWE. Then Mr. Perfect feuds with the narcissist Lex Luger. They had a match at WrestleMania 9, which was decent, but Lex Luger won. And then Mr. Perfect gets into a feud with Shawn Michaels over the IC Championship. And then Mr. Perfect qualifies for King of the Ring 1993. He had 3 matches with Doink, the Clown. 2 with Time Limit Josh. Third one, he finally beats him. And then Mr. Perfect's in the 1993 King of the Ring. He has a match with Mr. Hughes in the first round beats him by disqualification. Then he has a classic second round match, semifinals with Bret the Hitman Hart, and it was a little bit of a tease of Mr. Perfect heel turn. Even both were faces. And then Perfect feuds with Shawn Michaels, and they have a match at SummerSlam 1993 for the IC Championship. Shawn Michaels wins by counter because Big Daddy Cool Diesel, Shawn Michaels' bodyguard, interferes, and then Mr. Perfect was slated to feud with Diesel, but his face run was a flop big time because I couldn't buy Mr. Perfect as a face. He kind of had the steam was probably big when he beat Ric Flair, and the loser leaves WWE match at Monday Night Raw, but the face run in 1993 wasn't Mr. Perfect. It was anything but perfect. WrestleMania 10, Mr. Perfect becomes a special guest referee for the title match between Luger and Yokozuna, and Luger taps Mr. Perfect on the like this, disqualifies him. Mr. Perfect's a heel again, and it was supposed to be slated Mr. Perfect against Lex Luger for a house show run in 1994 after WrestleMania, but Mr. Perfect no-shows a few house shows because his back's bothering him again. He's gone, and for the next 18 months, Mr. Perfect doesn't wrestle. He's not even on any professional wrestling television. There was rumors he was going to pop up in WCW around this time, but that never came to be. And in November 1995, Mr. Perfect returns as a heel announcer. He made his debut at Survivor Series, and he goes on Superstars, and it was teasings about him making a comeback and stuff. Around this time, he was scouting Triple H, and every time Triple H had a match on television, he would steal his valet. And this continued and continued and continued. And then Mr. Perfect was giving advice to the Wild Man Mark Mello. And the Wild Man Mark Mello won the IC Championship in September 1996. And he was advising him. And Mr. Perfect challenged Triple H to a match on Monday Night Raw in October of 1996. But during the backstage segment, Mr. Perfect rammed something into Mr. Perfect's back, hurting him, and Wildman Mark Mello takes his place in a match, and he puts the IC title against Triple H, and then the referee gets knocked out. Mr. Perfect comes up. He has a chair. He's about to hit Triple H, but he hits Mark Mello instead, and then Triple H 1, 2, 3. Mr. Perfect's a heel again, and he's aligned with Triple H. But this was when, around this time, Mr. Perfect's contract with the WWE was expiring, and he was getting a big money offer from WCW. He took the big money offer from WCW, but there was a clause in the contract he couldn't be on WCW TV for 9 months, so he had to sit out for 9 months. And when he debuted in WCW in July of 1997, he was kind of a tweener. He was a surprise partner for Diamond Dallas Page in a tag team match at Bash at the Beach. He was named Curt Henning, Minnesota's greatest athlete. He turns on Diamond Dallas Page, and then he's rumored to be joining the Four Horsemen. And then there was a memorable interview on Monday Nitro where Arn Anderson was forced to retire because of his neck and arm trouble, and he said to Mr. Perfect, Curt Hennig, I'm not giving you any spot. I'm giving you my spot as the enforcer of the Four Horsemen. Curt Hennig accepts it, and then the Four Horsemen have the match against the NWO at Fall Brawl, the War Games, and before the match, Curt Hennig is supposedly attacked, and then he's coming down hurt, and when the War Games goes on, Curt Hennig enters the ring, and he thinks he's going to attack the NWO, but he attacks Four Horsemen, including with Lid, beating the Horsemen. And Curt Hennig joins the NWO, and then the next night he beats Steve Mongo McMichaels for the WCW US Champion. And Curt, for the next 3 months, was in US Champion, and he faced off against Lex Luger, Ric Flair, and a few others. He loses to the WCW United States Championship to Diamond Dallas Page at Starrcade 97, and then for the next year and a half, Mr. Perfect is Curt Hennig is lost in shuffle in the NWO WCW thing. He wasn't getting a major push and stuff, and then after the NWO is dissolved completely, he gets maybe a minor push with the teaming with Barry Windham, and they were WCW Tag Team Champions for a while, and then him and Barry Windham form a faction with the late Bob B. Duncan Jr. and Barry Windham's younger brother Kendall Windham, called the West Texas Rednecks, and they had Curly Bill, who was the bodyguard, Virgil Vincent, as their lackey, and it was a okay gimmick, but they were famous for the song "Rap is Crap." They were claiming to be country music singers. The "Rap is Crap" thing was very, very funny, but it was okay. But it was a waste of talent for Curt Hennig to be in such a group like that, which was more a comedy. Plus, in addition, him and Barry Windham were wasted at this point as talents, and then Curt Hennig gets flooded down more talent. He feuds with Sean Stasiak, and he steals his gimmick called the Perfect One, and then Curt Hennig eventually leaves WCW in 2000 when his contract expires, and then the rest of his wrestling career, he's in independence and stuff like that. Plus, around this time, he was heavy on doing drugs and stuff. He made a comeback to the WWE in Royal Rumble 2002 as a surprise mystery entrance of the Royal Rumble, and he had a decent push at the Rumble. He was one of the final 4 participants, and then he was going to get a minor push, but he was relegated jobber status. He gets into a fight with Brock Lesnar on an overseas tour in the airplane. He gets fired by the WWE, and then he goes back to becoming Curt Hennig, and then he briefly shows up in TNA, but tragically in February 2003, Mr. Perfect passes away at the age of 44, and it's very sad that he passed away so young. Mr. Perfect was a legendary heel, probably one of the top 10 heels ever in the WWE, and he was very funny. It's too bad his talents were wasted in WCW, but that was another story. And Mr. Perfect finally got recognition by being put in the Hall of Fame in 2007 posthumously. The next year, in 2008, there was a DVD devoted to Mr. Perfect, The Life and Times of Mr. Perfect, and it became the best-selling DVD sold in all of sports and recreations for about 4 weeks in October 2008. Amazing that his popularity is still there years after he passes away. Amazing. I have that DVD. It's a great DVD. So you could get it through Amazon or other sites. And that's about it on that. Well, Facebook friends and YouTube followers, I'll be going now. I'll see you tomorrow, Facebook friends and YouTube followers. Last status, I'll tell you, Facebook friends. Okay, bye.